That was a slow count on the one, so I have no idea how the counting on the show is going. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. We are sorry it's been a while, a combination of Christmas time, COVID. My wife is in graduate school, and the NBA just ramping everything up, Brian, just like you, had a weird count. But we are back. Luckily, Chris Yeh is keeping us on track. Let's see if I can do introductions. I'm Dre Alvarez, found most places as Nerd Numbers. I'm just, again, Chris, because you are the reason we keep having shows. Chris Yeh, official co-host of the Boxscore Geek show.
Woohoo!
But more importantly, let's get to some of the stuff. Blitzscaling Ventures is showing up officially on our Zoom call, and of course, the Chris Yeh podcast. Lead author of, or actually, I was going to say, I should ask that more officially. Between you and Reid Hoffman, are you co-lead author? Do you take one? If this was an academic paper, how would you list that out?
So I think that the convention is that Reid is the lead author. His name comes first. It helps when you are world famous. But their division of labor is, people often say, well, you write the books. I'm like, well, to be precise, I do most of the typing. But the thing is that the books draw on Reid's experience and his ideas. So the ideas originate mostly from Reid, although I take part in them. But I'm the one who refines them into the final form that they are today.
So I've got a few things. So just to make sure that full thing is out there, co-author of the New York Times bestseller Blitzscaling. And then, of course, if you look up the term blitzscaling, I think blitzscaling.com is a site itself. Probably what you are most well known for at this point, which is remarkable because I would say also co-author of the New York Times bestseller, The Alliance. But we have known you forever as the ultimate Laker fan, Chris Yeh, who you can find on Twitter as Chris Yeh, at Chris Yeh. And as you've been noted, spelled last name Y-E-H, Chris spelled normally. Chris, I'm going to see if this geeky thing lands and if I can get us off on a tangent, because I know you are also a pop culture and sci-fi aficionado. Are you a big Neil Gaiman fan?
So I have read a fair amount of Neil Gaiman, but I am not a Neil Gaiman super fan, but I am a fan of his.
So I was going to ask if you are aware of the book and the now hit BBC / I think Amazon picked it up show Good Omens.
Yes, I am. I've watched Good Omens. Have they launched a second season? I watched the first season.
Well, I was going to say it's based on a book, and the key point is that book was written behind Titans, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. And it was very fascinating because I believe I was reading an interview with Terry Pratchett. They co-wrote it, and he said, we wrote it together on a computer. This is old school days, like 80s and 90s. We wrote it together, I think 90s. We wrote it together, so I can give you an exact count as to how many words I typed. But we had phone conversation, etc. So it was very funny. It was hearkening back to that thing, basically saying when you have multiple people writing something together, how do you really divide the division of labor? So I wonder if you like the metaphor. You and Reid Hoffman, the Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman of the business writing world.
I love that. By the way, let's pour one out for the late, great Terry Pratchett, one of the greatest titans of science fiction and fantasy, the creator, of course, of the Discworld novels, and also coming to screen soon from Discworld, the adaptation of Guards.
I haven't seen it. I was going to say, Terry Pratchett, I got huge into from his essentially BBC adaptations of his book. And one of the weird ones is, I think it's Tennant and how did I just drop his name?
You're thinking, so David Tennant and Michael Sheen.
Michael Sheen, thank you. I was about to look that up. In Good Omens, that was one of the first adaptations of a Neil Gaiman and or Terry Pratchett work. There have been some great ones, American Gods as well, for Neil Gaiman. That was one of the first that I thought was better than the book. And the biggest reason was exactly those two people, David Tennant and Martin Sheen, or not Martin.
Michael Sheen.
Michael Sheen.
Charlie Sheen.
Martin Sheen is American actor, formerly Martin Estevez, and then sometimes confused with Michael Sheen is the American actor Michael Shannon. Very different.
Yep. See, I was going to say, I feel good and bad. We talk a lot of Lakers and sports with you and business second, and your pop culture is remarkable as well. But I was going to say their chemistry was so good that unfortunately that elevated the book because it was a mini series that Neil Gaiman was a producer on. It was very faithful to the book, had all the space to adapt the book perfectly. But then the thing is, Terry Pratchett, Neil Gaiman just could not match those two, heavyweight actors' chemistry, and that added a bunch. So I was shocked because if you go look at some of the Terry Pratchett, let's see, Hogfather, Going Postal is a really good one that I like.
I've watched both of those.
Adaptation-
Yes.
They're great. The books are better, but I would say Good Omens, and you can fight me on this, is one of the cases where the adaptation is better than the books. Oh, I was going to say, it's not why we have you here. Let me introduce Brian, and we'll get to the NBA. So produced as always by our producer, voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster, found on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Sorry, Brian, I've been talking over you already.
Well, I'm ready for some NBA, Dre and Chris. Tomorrow night, very exciting. 2020, we've had a tough time. Everyone has this year. I think we deserve an NBA season to start right about now.
I would say it was funny. I'm a huge fan of the Unpopular Opinion podcast, and normally they're more cynical even when things are going well. And Adam Todd Brown even noted, he's like, vaccine on the way, right? 2 with above 90% efficiency. Joe Biden got elected. So 2021, obviously we're not out of the woods yet, but we can be a little happy. I'm going to use that to springboard into our first team, Brian. I want to talk the Bucks first, because the biggest news, Bucks and Lakers, we have argued both might have gotten worse in the offseason. But the key point for both is Bucks resigned Giannis to a max. Is it an official max on the Lakers with Anthony Davis, Chris?
Yes, it is. It is an official max. However, it is because Anthony Davis has not reached the 10-year mark. It is not a full-on gigantic max. The irony is, and I've pointed this out many times, Anthony Davis is making the same amount of money over the next 5 years that Paul George is going to make over the next 4.
Yeah, you were, Lakers fans, especially super ones like yourself, Chris, you do not play around with feuds because the minute the Lakers got Anthony Davis for that contract and the Clippers picked up Paul George, you were just like, what? Who would you rather have? And I think my joking response is I said, you've gotten so big time, you've got to capture us now, Chris, to just verify we're not bots. Because the only people that take Paul George at that contract over, we can put it this way, Anthony Davis over the exact same contract too. The only people that would take Paul George at this point over Anthony Davis are Paul George, relatives of Paul George, or Paul George's agent.
No offense to Pandemic Paul, but he just does not match up with Anthony Davis either in production on the court or really the ability to help carry a team. I'm afraid that Paul George has revealed himself to not be a particularly good leader.
Well, it's rough, and there's a lot there. We were talking pre-show about this, how the pandemic is just not normal, and the bubble wasn't normal, and there's a lot going on there. But I think it is fair to say I've had this a lot in NBA where there are players I love that I think are great, that I love on my team, and the player I'm going to use, classical example that just epitomizes this for me, was Steve Francis. Because for those that don't remember, on the Houston Rockets, Steve Francis's nickname was the franchise, because last name was so close. So Steve Francis, the franchise. Don't say that too close to each other. It's a real tongue twister. And they were offered Tracy McGrady for Steve Francis, and I said, there is nobody in the world at that time that wouldn't have immediately shipped Steve Francis out the door for Tracy McGrady. And Anthony Davis is another one of these players. The Lakers did this, in fact. I basically said, you can trade your entire roster for Anthony Davis, barring, of course, I think the only player I would have said no to was LeBron James. Anything that wasn't LeBron James on the Lakers, you could ship out the door for Anthony Davis and have no reservations. And the Lakers did that, and they got a title. You just can't feel bad when you're doing those kind of comparisons, going, I love you, you're a great player, I'd fully give you the money you're worth. But if I get an opportunity at an Anthony Davis, at a Tracy McGrady at that time, I do it in a heartbeat. I'm kind of lucky in that the Nuggets with Nikola Jokic do have one of these players that I just don't think you would ever be able to trade Jokic for equal value. Just because he's on a max contract at this point, I think the only player would be Luka Doncic, and that's just because he's on a rookie contract. But anyway, let's talk the Bucks. So the Bucks re-sign Giannis to a full max. Now, the kind of consensus, and I think we all have this, Brian was saying this to me, and I think you might agree, is it looks like they might have taken a step back. But the key point I have, so this is my hot take, I think the Bucks are the favorites again for the title. And the Bucks took a step back, but it wasn't big enough. And let's give a huge shout out. Brian found this site, Hispanos NBA.
Oh, yeah.
Leaves Real GM, leaves Basketball Reference, leaves ESPN, leaves all the other sites to shame. en.hispanosmba.com/transaction has the most clean, concise breakdown of what every team has done in the offseason. I love it. I would say actually Real GM has this for draft picks. Real GM has the best, if you want a good draft pick, like what teams own what. But so that's basically what we're going to be doing on the show. We're going to be going team by team. So the Milwaukee Bucks, let's leave the huge one. The big ones is Giannis and Thanasis Antetokounmpo stayed, Pat Connaughton, Dante DiVincenzo, Chris Middleton, and then of course two players, Brooke Lopez and DJ Wilson stayed. We're not huge on those. Giannis, Pat Connaughton, Dante DiVincenzo.
Connaughton. I can't let you say it twice. Sorry. Connaughton.
I was going to say, I have friends with the last name Connaughton. That's how it's pronounced.
Okay. I don't know why I'm seeing I'm trying to do like a German thing with the GH there. But anyway, so essentially
it's a soft T.
Giannis is the only real major player among there. Chris Middleton, there is a question. He looked really, really good last season pre-bubble, came into the bubble, admitted, hey, I've been playing basketball. I can't fault him because pre-bubble, I was like, NBA is not going to restart. The season's over, right? And they did it, and they did it better than any sports league out there. They did lose, so these are some names that matter. Eric Bledsoe, George Hill. Let's see. Remind me again. Did Ersan Ilyasova have a bounce back year last year, Brian?
He's been a little better.
He was pretty good.
I'll say is with his age, though, guys. I just don't expect him to be able to turn back the clock every year. I don't. Well, okay. Let me put it to you this way. When we talk about the Bucks, right, one of the best teams in the league, we expect them to make a run for the finals this year. When you're deep into the finals, right, your top 6th or 7th players are really what's going to matter the most in the playoffs. They don't care about the regular season. So I just don't care about Ilyasova or even Kyle Korver, who I've loved historically for that matter. I just don't think those are huge losses for them.
So here's the good news. Giannis, Chris Middleton were 1 and 2 last year. George Hill was 3rd, so that is going to hurt. George Hill really shocked me last year with how well he played.
You're saying wins produced overall?
Yeah, wins produced overall, but also production. George Hill played star level per minute. Dante DiVincenzo was 4. Eric Bledsoe was 5. Pat Connaughton was 6. Ersan Ilyasova was 7. And Wes Matthews was exactly average at 8. Kyle Korver was actually pretty good per minute at 9. So in terms of what you're saying, right, Brian, the top 6. They have lost George Hill, Eric Bledsoe, Ersan Ilyasova.
Yep.
In terms of what they have gotten back, they did get back Drew Holiday. So these are new players in. Drew Holiday's pretty good. I would say they got Torrey Craig from the Nuggets, who is also pretty good. I don't know. Bryn Forbes didn't really impress me when I looked at him. Jordan Nwora is a rookie. Bobby Portis is an interesting one.
I liked him when he was young, but he's been hurt and playing on bad teams. I would not expect him to contribute.
He also does tend to break people's faces.
That's right. Bobby
Portis was terrible last season.
Although, Chris, remind me what happened here. Didn't by him punching Mirotic, he got Mirotic traded, but got to stay on the Bulls himself. Is that right?
That is correct, which is a pretty remarkable fact.
That is, yes, remarkable is the word I'd use. Sorry,
but
Dre.
then he later paid for his crime by going to the Knicks.
I mean, it's interesting. I would agree, Brian. I just looked at him up. He was terrible on the Knicks. We will say this. This was fascinating. At the end of last year's playoffs, everybody was and I'm just messing. I'm out of the loop. So it's a Budenholzer, I believe, is how it's pronounced, right, Brian? Or is it Budenholzer? Budenholzer. Okay.
I always say Budenholzer, but I'm wrong. It's Budenholzer.
Budenholzer is.
But it's because they call him Coach Bud. That's the thing.
Yes. Thank you, Chris. You bailed me out, Chris. You bailed me out.
I was like, that's just mean. You do the nickname there. Okay. But Coach Bud, that's easier actually.
I'm gonna start calling him Coach Bood. Anyway, sorry, Dre.
I'll buy you a 6-pack of whatever you want or something, Brian. If
this boot's for you, Dre. This boot's for you.
Oh my God. You just mic drop and walk after. That might be this show's title, Brian. Damn. But okay. If you ever happen to get an interview with him for whatever reason and you call him Coach Boot, he has seemed to do amazingly well with player production. He got roasted last year because the Bucks underperformed in the playoffs, and one of the reasons they probably underperformed was he did normal minute. He was doing regular season playoff allocation. And the thing is, this happened with the Spurs back in the day. The Spurs were such a strong team that on one of those titles they took from the Heat, you could just do that, and they were that good. But then the next year, when the Warriors actually came to prominence, it's like, actually it was the Thunder, but the Thunder were good enough. It's like, you can't do that. You got to play playoff minutes. But Coach Bud or Coach Bood, whatever, take your pick, dealer's choice, is really good at player development. So some of these players, in as an example, Torrey Craig, maybe we'll see a resurgence from Bobby Portis. My big takeaway on the Bucks, though, is they were, a 57-win team last year, 76%, I want to say, something like that, because remember, it wasn't a full season. So, on an 82, that would still be close to a 60-win team. Even if we think that they've taken a couple steps back, they're still in that 55 title window echelon with the best player in the NBA. And I don't think the rest of the NBA has done enough to really keep pace. So I still think they're the favorites. I think it's always kind of a funny thing. We're always chasing kind of a moving target. We may not think the moves they did in this offseason were great, outside of maybe Torrey Craig. Torrey Craig, I think, was a good pickup, but, the players they let out the door. Drew Holiday is probably commensurate to Eric Bledsoe, but what I would say, I'm curious if you have this take, Chris, if you'd agree. I think signing Drew Holiday was about getting Giannis to buy in, and I think it worked.
That's correct. If you're able to get Giannis to re-sign with you by trading for Drew Holiday, it's worth it regardless of whether Drew Holiday ever plays for the franchise.
And I've called that the Ray Allen principle in past. And it's very similar, by the way, because Ray Allen, you'll recognize, was a very good player. It's interesting if you actually look at his numbers. So Ray Allen on the Sonics, one of the last, poor guy, man, one of the last real Sonics, looked like he was starting to decline with older age. But Kevin Garnett didn't want to sign with the Boston Celtics unless there was an established star. They traded away, very much like Anthony Davis, traded away all of their assets to get Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett. And Kevin Garnett said, I'll go play with Ray Allen. So I think if we look at the numbers, George Hill plus Eric Bledsoe was significantly better than Torrey Craig plus Drew Holiday. But you were mentioning this, Brian. Eric Bledsoe played horrible in the playoffs last year. Yeah. People are saying he's done. So if Giannis thinks Eric Bledsoe is not a good enough teammate to get me over the hill, Drew Holiday is. Absolutely worth the money.
By the way, do you remember what the draft pick was that the Celtics traded for Ray Allen and who it turned out to be?
Wasn't that Jeff Green?
Yes, it was.
It was.
And
that trade was worth it 50 million ways to Sunday.
And we're going to get you. And then another. How am I missing his name? I think it was an Al. On Boston.
Al Jefferson was part of the trade for KG. So he was the centerpiece of the KG trade.
That was one of those things we always feel bad about, this young player that looks great, that has an injury and is just never the same. So yeah, the Celtics kind of won in that Jeff Green never panned out and Al Jefferson never got healthy. So
and he got sent to the Timberwolves. That was not great for him either.
He was okay on the he was. Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
Compared to Boston, right? He could have played with those guys.
I was going to say, but yeah, like I said, my take on the Bucks is they're probably still close to a 60-win team because they haven't done enough movement to make themselves that worse. They still have the best player in the NBA. To your point, Brian, they still have a pretty good top 6 production. Now, there is my fear here is they hung on to Brook Lopez and actually extended him, if I recall. So I think Brook Lopez, if I remember, did actually get a couple-year extension. And it's not that much money, but the real issue with that is Brook Lopez has actually been seeing a decline. And that's not a problem, right? He's in his 30s, and he's also a center that he's a stretch center, but we've kind of gone, why do you need a stretch center? You can just have your guards take outside shots, and you should really be looking for center production out of centers. And so yeah, Brook Lopez is signed through 2023 at roughly $13 million a season, and so because they gave him that extension, they're probably still going to give him the minutes, and he is a weak spot. I've called that before. These Achilles heels in star teams, and I think Brook Lopez could be that for the Bucks.
Although you got to say, given that the Milwaukee Bucks produced 63 wins in a 73-win season, just how big an Achilles heel is Brook Lopez?
Yeah. Well, again, if they got a couple wins worse there, and he ages a little, but I also think the bigger point, right? Let's look at the NBA last season, because I think another problem is, maybe we can hop to them next. Miami. I think Miami was a great underdog story. Miami kind of reminded me of a March Madness story because, yes, they have a star. They had, 1 or 2 stars, right, between Jimmy Butler and Bam, depending on his production.
Oh, don't forget about Andre, Dre. Don't forget about Andre. Come on.
Andre's over the hump, man.
But I love him. Okay.
Over the hill.
Over the hill. Thank you.
Over the hump is a good thing, right, Chris? But over the hill is
exactly.
bad. That's good distinction.
Okay. So the question is, if we look out west, the number 2 and 3 teams would be Toronto and Boston, and I don't think Miami massively outperformed, and I don't think they did enough to improve. So the question is, do I think the Bucks got worse enough to fall into that Raptors Celtics range? And I really don't think they did.
No, I think the Bucks are clearly still the favorite, despite the fact that they're taking a step back. Do you know how many more wins they created than the second best team in the NBA last season?
Was the second? So the second best, if we followed SRS, should have been the Clippers.
Nope, it was the Mavericks.
The Mavericks, really?
Oh, that's right.
Because of their horrendous Pythagorean record, but the Mavericks produced 11 fewer wins than the Milwaukee Bucks. That's an 11-win margin the Bucks have. They might have gotten a little bit worse. They didn't get 11 wins worse. And as we discussed earlier, it's not like the Mavericks got better. They lost their second best player, Taylon Wright, and they replaced him with Josh Richardson. Guess what? They're not getting better, other than Luka.
Okay. So I mean, by the way, I'm glad you got us back into podcasting, and of course the issue is we've been out for a bit, and of course we're going into the NBA season. That's all 30 teams. Of course, Brian had to foolishly give us this amazing site that lets us look over everything.
There's so much good stuff on this site, Dre. SpontaneousNBA.com. It's like we're sponsored, but we aren't. We just love the site.
They're amazing. So here's what I was going to say, though, on the Mavericks, Chris. I get to turn into one of the geeky Boxscore Geeks people that I normally mock.
Go ahead.
So the Mavericks have Kristaps Porzingis, who we think is overrated, not good, and he appears to be injured again. The Mavericks also have Boban Marjanovic. So by force, not by choice, by force, the Mavericks might be forced into playing more Boban this season. And they've already got Luka. I like some of their other players. I could see age to Luka Doncic and increased minutes to Boban make this team a potential contender. I would love to see it. I agree. Hurts to lose. I would think Taylon, is it Taylon, right? Is
Taylon.
How you say it? Taylon. And then none of the players, I mean, the problem is all of the players they picked up outside of Wes Iwundu and James Johnson and Josh Richardson are rookies. And those, Wes is fine. He's a completely serviceable role player, replacement player, however you want to say it. James Johnson and Josh Richardson, I don't believe are anything special. But the core of this team, right? So Maxi Kleber, Boban, Luka, pretty good. Dorian Finney-Smith and Tim Hardaway's fine. I think they've got some weaknesses, but I think they've got some potential.
I've got a Dallas take, Dre.
Okay, let's hear it.
Ooh.
So one of the big things about them last year is that Dwight Powell was hurt, and it was something really bad, right? Like an Achilles or an ACL.
Tendon tear.
Yeah, it's an Achilles
tendon tear.
And he was really good before he got hurt. So to me, Dwight Powell is their big wild card. Like he could be their best big man if healthy, but the Achilles are really rough, right? In the past, it was a death sentence. Like Rudy Gay wasn't great before, but he's even worse after. But we have, like, Kevin Durant looks good this preseason. We've seen a few other players be better after Achilles. So
isn't the biggest name in like professional basketball that we could maybe use and wonder if it's hearkening a future is Breanna Stewart?
Yes.
I thought she had Achilles.
Yeah.
She did. She tore her Achilles tendon, came back, WNBA Finals MVP.
They crushed it, too. They crushed
incredible.
it.
By the way, Rudy Gay actually came back, rare case. He came back and in many ways was better after the injury.
He must have been so bad before that I didn't notice.
The question was the Spurs. He went from, Raptors with Ivy coaching. He went to Popovich, changed his, I think if I recall looking at it was, shot selection. And that could be a huge part of it, right? There are players that are fascinating where we look at their game and we kind of go, hey, if you changed a few things up, you could go from being this overrated player that we bash to being great. Two such players, by the way, one who kind of did it briefly under Mike D'Antoni. One was Carmelo Anthony. One remains Donovan Mitchell. And even back in the day, I would argue if you looked at the answer, who is, the poster child for who was called overrated and kind of sparked the wages of wins movement, Allen Iverson was a pretty amazing passer, good at stealing. And you were just like, if you would just stop taking these bad shots, Kobe Bryant, same boat, by the way, Chris, right? Amazing mid-range scorer in terms of how he compared to the average person that takes a mid-range shot. But the trick is the good players realize you don't take that mid-range shot.
Yeah, Kobe Bryant, the story of the late, great Kobe Bryant is that He had some of the greatest shot making combined with the worst shot selection in NBA history, which meant that he was only an average scorer and yet was a great player because of all the other things he did. So there's a lot of ironies in there.
Yep. And then you're the one who noted this to me, and I still there are a couple questions in NBA history that keep me up at night. One is, what if Melo or Chris Bosh had gone to the Detroit Pistons? That just keeps, just once a week I just go, what if, right? Of course, what if Tim Duncan and healthy Grant Hill had gone to Orlando? Another huge one is 2004 Kobe, because you're the ones who's pointed that at me. When Gary Payton, Shaquille O'Neal, was another big name, Karl Malone. How did I drop Karl Malone? Sorry, well, not sorry. I don't like Karl Malone off the court. Whatever. That's fair. But on the court, amazing player. When Gary Payton, Karl Malone, and Shaq were on the Lakers, Kobe Bryant, team player, best per minute numbers in 2004. And then, of course, the Lakers, through no fault of their own, injury to Karl Malone in the finals, kind of implosion at the top level, right, between Shaq, Karl Malone, and Gary Payton, falls apart. Kobe Bryant, and then, of course, they foolishly let Phil Jackson out the door as well. Kobe Bryant gets in his head, I have to be the guy, and you can't fault him, right? What was that insane year, 2006, which was under Phil Jackson, but like 2006, how many points? Like 30 some odd points per game, led the league, of course.
Over 35 points a game.
Absurd,
81 right? Point game against Toronto.
That's right.
And, of course, you questioned yourself. He was told that season you have to shoulder load, because the rest, I think you might be one of 5 people on the planet, Chris, that could list more than 4 players on that Lakers roster, right? I think Smush, I know Smush Parker, but I remember.
Oh, you're thinking about 2006?
Yeah.
Oh, well, 2006. Let's see. We had a couple of
five
immortal
players. Let's go.
We had a number of immortal players there. We had Kobe Bryant, obviously. We had Smush Parker. We had Chris Mim. We had the great Kwame Brown.
Oh, my God.
Who Kobe chased off the team.
Rightfully so, I'd argue. Probably.
Exactly. There were many people he chased off the team. Chucky Atkins was also another player he chased off that team. But in 2006, in addition to all those, of course, they still had Lamar Odom on that team. And Lamar was, again, the second best player on that team. It was a decent team. And I will actually say this one thing in defense of Kwame Brown, which is Kwame Brown was always a very good one-on-one post defender.
And yeah, I think injuries, some other stuff, high expectations, etc.
Hands of stone, but he was a pretty good post defender.
But yeah, and sorry to get all the way back to Duguay, the players that could just change up their game a little to do that. We got done the Kobe rabbit hole. Let's finish our hot take on the Mavericks and move on to another team, because we've got a bunch of NBA, including our favorites. I think they're a dark horse, depending on what happens. This is all the Dallas Mavericks.
Luka. That's all that matters.
They are always the wild card in our projections, which is if you told me they would, I think thanks to Luka, healthy Luka, 40 is their floor in my opinion. But I could see them being a 55-win team and a contender, depending on if they play the right rotation, if they get another breakout. So all over the place.
I mean 55 in an 82-game season, right?
Yes, not in the 60. But what do you think, Chris? I'll let you be the final take, and we'll move on. Let's go to the Lakers next.
Well, what I'm going to do is I will say that I'm going to say that the Dallas Mavericks are able to win the 2nd seed in the West ahead of the Denver Nuggets.
So who wins the 1st seed?
The Lakers.
The Lakers.
You still put okay. Well, let's beautiful segue. So you think the Lakers still stay? So let's run down some of what's happened. So here's the rough part. The Lakers have lost Danny Green, Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee, Rajon Rondo, good riddance, J.R. Smith. You should thank LeBron James for your entire post-Nuggets career. Deion Waiters and Avery Bradley's. But, I mean, Danny Green, Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee, and Rajon Rondo. How many wins was that last season for the Lakers?
That was 16 wins.
That's a lot to walk out the door.
It is. Now, mostly Dwight and JaVale, by the way.
Okay, yeah. Well, Danny Green, was he just average, basically?
He was a little bit above average, but pretty close to average.
Rondo didn't play a lot in the regular season, did he? He just played in the playoffs.
And he was below average in the regular season. He just became playoff Rondo in the
playoff Rondo, that's right.
So the Lakers sent out 16 wins in those players, and they brought in Montrezl Harrell, Marc Gasol.
Oh, you were
Wesley
wishful
Matthews
thinking there.
dreaming.
You were wishful thinking.
The Lakers are still holding out hope. Powell
Oh, I'd
has
love
been
to see that.
posting workout videos. I mean, it would be amazing for the two brothers to play together. Wesley Matthews Jr. What is Schroeder? Dennis Schroeder, and Alfonso McKinney. So together, those players produced 10 wins last year. So the Lakers are basically down 6 wins from the previous year.
But let's give one out, and one huge out on both sides. I think Dwight Howard, I was shocked by how well he played, especially against my Nuggets. It was just stupid, Chris. I mean, the Nuggets shouldn't have beaten the Lakers anyway on paper, but Dwight Howard deciding to pretend it was 2008 was just unfair.
Well, you will remember Dwight Howard was a key part of the reason I said the Lakers could win 70 games.
You were absolutely right. Yeah, you get to hang. It took the season getting shortened to prove you wrong, but number 1 seed out west, amazing. I was listening to an old podcast of ours, Bryant, and I was laughing because I was basically saying LeBron James had another long playoff run in him as long as he stayed out east. I was predicting the demise of LeBron James 4 years ago. And I would not have expected LeBron James goes west and gets that additional long playoff run. Montrezl Harrell had an off year, and then you're the one who brought this to our attention, Chris. Went into the bubble having lost his grandmother, who you have said raised him. So essentially lost his mother, went into a bubble, something we talked a lot about in the couple of shows we did record during the pandemic, which is still going on, but I guess during the bubble part of the pandemic, namely saying, it's weird how just we kind of expected all the athletes in the bubble to play normal. And you were even saying some of the teams, the Lakers and the Heat as examples, one of the reasons they might have fared so well is these were two teams that managed to kind of find a way to stay sane in the bubble with, team chemistry, camaraderie, whatever, something that we normally on this show roll our eyes at. But if there is ever a time where you need your team to get along, to all be on the same page, to not let small things get to you, that's when you're all locked together. I get to, in a good way, my wife this weekend wanted to take my son to do curbside pickup. And she said, hey, we can hang out with you, or we can go, I can take him for this real quick errand if you would like. And I said, you know what? I love you both. But right now, I also love it when you're both gone, just because we've all, been in the house for months together. So, finding a way to keep sanity when you're all locked together. And the Lakers did manage to kind of do that with that group. Montrezl Harrell, the Clippers are one of these teams, the exact opposite. The team seemed to turn on each other really quick. Paul George disappeared, so people are pointing the fingers at him. You were pointing out to me it's old school at this point, but there's drama between the Rivers and George families. Admittedly, it's 5 years old, but there's a difference between having drama with a coworker and drama with a coworker who is now your roommate. So Montrezl Harrell, I'm predicting a bounce back season. So you actually have me more optimistic than I would have liked, Chris, because I thought the Nuggets are taking that number 1 seed. You said 16 wins walked out the door, 10 wins came back in, but I think Montrezl Harrell, especially depending on minutes, could adjust for some of that.
Absolutely. I think that Harrell could definitely come back and have a bounce back season. I think that the other thing that is really interesting, the other big X factor for the Lakers, is the possibility of Taylon Horton Tucker playing an important role. Now, most people haven't heard about Taylon Horton Tucker until this preseason where he went nuts. But this is a fascinating example. He was a player that we didn't really like coming out of college. So he played at Iowa State, and his college numbers were not particularly good. And he played in the G League, and he looked all right. But this is a player which is exactly the opposite of what we preach, which is he was picked because of his measurables, not because of his performance. Taylon Horton Tucker is a 6'4" guard who weighs 230 pounds and has a 7'1" wingspan.
What?
Yes. He has the most unusual set of measurables you'll ever see. So he plays basically point guard for the Lakers as the off-the-bounce creator. He weighs 230 pounds. So even though he's only 20 years old, he just turned 20. If you watched him in the preseason, he was driving to the basket and people were bouncing off him so that he could finish at the rim with 7-footer arms and wingspan. And basically he offers the possibility of someone who can play like a point guard, defend all the way up through small forwards and even power forwards if necessary, and who has hands are third in the NBA in size, behind only Kawhi Leonard and I think one other player. So not only does he have the 7'1" incredible wingspan, he has hands that are only a half inch smaller than Kawhi Leonard's hands.
He's interesting. I'm looking at this, and based on all of that, this all gels, his shooting efficiency, et cetera. He is actually an anti-Morey ball. So not money ball, Morey ball. For those that don't know, Morey balls is layup and threes. I would say he should cut threes out of his repertoire, because he's shooting 7.6 threes per 100 possessions. Or let's see, per game. Sorry, trying to get the per game. 2.2. Now, admittedly, but let's stress this. He played 81 minutes last season in 6 games over 13.3, and 3-point shooting is one of the most variable, right? If he made 2 or 3 more threes in that time frame, he might be fine. But he can clearly finish at the rim.
Yes.
And all of what you just said explains that. So, I mean, that should be, and actually in the playoffs, he's on 5 shots, 2 for 5. So you're right. He's young and can have a breakout season. And the player that I also wonder on the Lakers, I really wonder your take, Chris, that's pulling a Wiggins is Kyle Kuzma. He has been getting worse every season, which is
fascinating
bizarre.
Question. So Kyle Kuzma is a polarizing figure, even among Lakers fans. He is probably the Laker that draws the most ire of the fan base. And Kyle Kuzma has not been a particularly good player in his NBA career. As you point out, there are a lot of problems with his statistics. The biggest ones being his 3-point shooting is terrible. It was above average his rookie season, but has gotten steadily worse since then. And his rebounding numbers for an ostensible power forward are atrociously bad. So that's why Kyle Kuzma's numbers do not look good. Now, the interesting question is, Kyle Kuzma just signed a 3-year contract extension that's going to pay him $40 million over those 3 years. So he's like a $12, $13 million a year player. And the interesting question is just how bad is it? Now, I'm not going to argue that it's necessarily a good signing, but I'm going to give you the explanation for why it might actually make sense. So reason number 1 is that the Lakers are capped out. After signing LeBron and Anthony Davis to extensions, which of course are great moves that the Lakers absolutely should be applauded for doing, it means there's essentially no way for the Lakers to get under the salary cap. So any players that they lose, they can only replace with minimum salaried players. And so somebody like Kyle Kuzma is a player that they can't really easily replace unless they pick up someone from the veterans minimum. So that would be the logic behind the signing, to try to hold on to an asset. Now, whether or not he's actually an asset is what we'll talk about next.
Right.
The interesting thing about Kyle Kuzma is, if he is able to improve his 3-point shooting, which is a gigantic if, then he offers something very interesting. So Kyle Kuzma is a 6'9" player who defends primarily wing positions. And the Lakers really feel like he's miscast as a power forward. And if you look at what happened in the preseason, they started him at small forward one game, they started him at power forward one game, and they started him at shooting guard one game.
Shooting guard would be fascinating. I like that.
Mm.
And so he is actually one of their primary wing defenders. So when the Lakers took on the Phoenix Suns, they started off with Kuzma defending Booker.
He's
their supersized Klay Thompson. Booker shot well during the game. He torched everyone because Booker's actually gotten pretty good as a scorer. But Kuzma is their guy for defending guys like Harden, for defending guys like Booker. And so what he offers them is positional versatility. He's a 6'9" guy who can switch everything, defend shooting guards, defend small forwards, defend power forwards, although he really does not do well against the extremely powerful power forwards. And he forms a part of the Lakers' core switch everything lineups. Because you may recall, the Lakers have their own death lineups. What they do is they switch AD to center. And AD, of course, can defend everyone from point guards to centers.
They did this against the Heat, right, in the finals.
Yeah, his arms cover the entire length of the court.
His arms cover the entire length of the court. Now, I want you to picture this now. The Lakers are going to throw out Anthony Davis at center. They throw out LeBron James at power forward. They throw out Kyle Kuzma at small forward. And then in the backcourt, they put out Alex Caruso, one of the greatest defenders of all time.
Yep.
And now Taylon Horton Tucker. And now imagine the smallest guy on the court for the Lakers is Taylon Horton Tucker with his 7'1" wingspan and 230-pound frame.
Well, I mean, it's got to be Caruso, right?
Caruso's 6'5".
What? Wow. So that's
Everyone thinks
big.
he's small, but he's not. He's 6'5".
Yeah,
it's the hairline, right? It takes a couple inches off the camera, but yeah, I've joked.
Yeah,
I've
Jared
joked
Allen is about 8 feet tall, by the way.
And I don't know where I'm not talking because I'm slowly.
Fletch is 6'5", 6'9" with the afro.
but I've noted, as compared to baseball, basketball is one of the weirdest sports because you look on TV and you see Shane Battier's, you see Andre Iguodala's, you see Alex Caruso's, and you think, look at that, the scrappy little defender out there, they're just, the whatever. And if you saw them at your gym, you would think they were the most jacked person there. So that is the funny thing. Now, let's do a math lesson, Chris, because I agree with you, Kyle. I don't like the signing, but let's break down some numbers. And I think,
and again, let me emphasize, I'm not saying I liked signing Kuzma at that level, but I'm offering the defense.
And by the way, your defense is completely sound. And like I said, I want to cheat and use a math lesson because I think what many people miss is the NBA has had inflation on many things, statistics and pay. And that's the problem, is because when you and I, who are used to the days of, I think, 3 years, 40 million would have been what like Steve Nash got, somewhere around there, a consummate salary. When MVP caliber, he was MVP caliber for the Mavericks too, by the way, Mark Cuban, you were wrong to let him out the door. When MVP caliber player Steve Nash signed with the Suns, I think he signed for like 4 years, 45 million. So we're used to these old contracts, but in the mid 2010s, the NBA saw a huge boost due to their ESPN contract, which gave them over $1 billion a season, which rose the salary cap such that every team essentially at a base level, let's see, this year I think was 113 or 118 million, somewhere around there. So let's break down some numbers. I'm going to cheat and steal a routine you've used on the show, Chris, which I really like. 113 million a year, somewhere around there. You divide that by, I'm going to do something a little different than averages. I'm going to go 50. You're a front office. You want to pay for a 50-win team. You've got 114, 113 to spend. That puts you at about 2.24 million per win. You go to Kyle Kuzma's contract, 40 million over 3 years. That's 13.3 million. By the way, I cheated and used Google calculator, so I'm not this good at the numbers. That's what I was typing earlier. 13.3 divided by 2.24 leaves you at 5.9, roughly 6 wins. Our math for an average player, so that's wins per 48 of 1-0 or a points over par of 0, meaning if that player played the full game with an average set of teammates against an average team at an average location, you would expect the point margin to be 0. They'd tie every game. 41-win team would leave you at about 5.9. We would say that player would be a 6-win player. Kyle Kuzma's contract, we wanted to be a 5.9-win player. So essentially, Kyle Kuzma's contract, because for those of us used to old contracts, seems bad, but you are paying for an average player. Now, the bad news, as we'll all note, looking at his last 2 seasons, he has been significantly below average. 2 seasons ago, he had an excuse. 2 seasons ago, before the Lakers got Anthony Davis, you say, they're playing Kyle Kuzma out of position at the power forward. You play him as a small forward, he looks better. Last season, at least according to Yahoo Basketball Reference and our positional adjustment, which is, an algorithm based on lineups and stuff, thought he was a small forward and he looked worse. But if that was an off year, he has a bounce back season, an easy way, as you're noting, Chris. He just marginally improves his threes. He's easily worth that contract. And you're throwing the bigger out, which I also like, which is other people have noted this. I think Paul DeVos noted this about Eric Gordon. It didn't turn out to be the case, but you need assets as an NBA team if you're over the cap, if you ever want to be able to do anything. So Kuzma, as a player that looks like a decent trade piece, if they ever do need to pull the trigger on something, is needed. You can't let Kuzma. The problem we might think from an economic standpoint is they're overpaying Kuzma by 13 million. But the problem is they keep Kuzma at 13 million. They have 13 million that they are allowed to spend. If they let Kuzma out the door, they are at 0, despite the fact that they're the Lakers and have the biggest bankroll in the NBA. They can pay for anybody they wanted.
The Lakers can afford to overpay and retain all their players because they make money hand over fist. It is astonishing how lucrative the Lakers are.
That's the best point. It's cheap enough that it's still tradable.
Yeah. And again, part of it is that Kyle Kuzma, and let's give credit to Kyle Kuzma as a player off the court rather than just on the court. We've talked a little bit before about Kyle Kuzma and how he has really maximized himself. So he is a 27th pick, late first round pick. Most of these guys don't get to stick around in the NBA, let alone get a $40 million contract. What has he done during that time? He has just been remarkable in maximizing his career. So first of all, he comes to the Lakers, and that's just blind luck. It's great to be a Laker. As you know, if you're a Laker, Sasha Vujacic was engaged to Maria Sharapova. That doesn't happen if he's playing for the Bucks. I'm sorry, Dre, but it's not going to happen.
Machine, yeah.
So,
is that his nickname, right? Did I get that right?
The Machine, yes, yeah. The Machine. So Kyle Kuzma comes to the Lakers. That's lucky. What does he do? First thing he does is he forms a partnership with Lonzo Ball, right? He and Lonzo Ball were the light-skinned brotherhood.
Right.
And Lonzo was Lonzo's main target, right? During that rookie season. All those outlet passes, those crazy hit heads that Lonzo's so incredible at, he was feeding the Kuz. And that's how Kuz became the Lakers' leading scorer as a rookie, makes the all-rookie team, and starts getting everyone's attention. Then in addition to everything else, what happens? Well, the Lakers then turn around and they sign LeBron James. Wow, LeBron James has come in. Well, what does Kyle Kuzma do? He immediately befriends LeBron James. I've shown you, I think, before the videos that you can see when they're out, when he and LeBron are both injured. He's out there. He's helping LeBron put his chains and jewelry on. He's putting an imaginary crown on LeBron's head. He knows where his bread is buttered. Now, it doesn't just stop there. Kyle Kuzma is the most popular player in terms of his work with the Lakers community and the Lakers front office. So he was the guy who was always going to say yes to every opportunity. We're like, we need a Laker to go visit kids in the hospital. We need the Laker to go open up this grocery store. He said yes to every single thing. The front office loves him. Jeannie Buss thinks of him as if he were like a surrogate son. So he's gotten on the good side of ownership as well as LeBron James, who is effectively ownership.
Did he join Clutch Agency or no?
He did not join Clutch. Interestingly enough, he is not part of Clutch. I don't know why. I would have assumed he would have joined Clutch. And in addition to everything else, Kyle Kuzma has a signature shoe. Did you know that?
Oh, I did not know
Kyle
that.
Kuzma has a signature shoe. It's not with Nike. I'm trying to remember. I think
it's a lot on social media compared
New
to most
Balance
players,
or something like that. But
by the way, slight tangent there. I have to just take this shot because it's not going to be more organically in the show. Kawhi Leonard's signature shoe with New Balance is also based on Jolly Rancher color scheme. And my favorite candy is Jolly Rancher chews. I joked with my wife that I wanted to get those shoes. I haven't bought myself. She used to make fun of me. I used to be stereotypical dad, would wear tube socks and white New Balance shoes. I've changed to be ankle socks and blacker shoes. My wife will pick them out at this point. So she made me cooler, unfortunately, as I got older, despite the fact that I had the 40-year-old dad vibe going in my 20s. But I've debated Kawhi's shoe just because of how they hit home on some SEO stuff for me.
Well, people are into dads these days. That's the good news for all us dads out there. But Kyle Kuzma has a signature shoe for Puma. Now, how many players come into the league as a late first-round pick and have won a championship and have got a signature shoe and endorsements? And he launched his first clothing line recently as well. There was a big photo shoot for his new clothing line. And he's done all this despite what we know is relatively poor on-court performance. What's the answer? He looks really good doing it. The hairstyles, the fact, when he's on the court, he just looks good playing.
He plays with a lot of effort.
He He tries hard. He works hard on defense. And he's got an amazing floater game. He's a beautiful cutting game. And the reason I think he's actually going to be better, and this is going to be his best season yet, besides the fact that he got paid, is that now he's going to be playing with Marc Gasol. And
interesting.
If you want to think about what's missing, well, LeBron James is not a LeBron James sits at the top of the key and picks people apart and goes to the cutters. LeBron James LeBron James takes the ball to the hole, puts pressure on the defense, and then slings it out for a three-point shot. So Marc Gasol is the thing that enables the best part of Kyle Kuzma's game, which is his ability to knife to the basket and finish around the rim.
So interesting. I kind of want this to happen, Chris, because a story I had back in the day, it's one of my favorites, is Marc Gasol was the secret behind Zach Randolph turning into a productive NBA player. Zach Randolph,
that's true.
One of these players that kept getting paid, but we were like, this player is terrible. And he had on and off court production problems. And we were just like, when the Memphis Grizzlies signed him, I think they either signed him outright or traded for him big. And we were like, this is the dumbest thing ever. And then they also ended up with Marc Gasol from the Pau Gasol trade, right? Because when they traded away Pau Gasol, they got the rights to Marc Gasol, second rounder. And I talked to Eric Weiss, who's I hope it's Weiss. It's either Eric Weiss or Eric Weiss. I think Weiss, who is a sports psychologist that's worked with teams, including them. And he was telling me, he's like, the friendship Marc Gasol had with Zach Randolph on and off court just turned around Zach Randolph's game, and it was just something that's coming. So if the second act of Marc Gasol's career is that he turns around Kyle Kuzma's game, I'll have a sequel to one of my favorite pieces. So I like it.
Now, Marc Gasol is going to be another one of those amazing tests of analytics versus narrative. So when you think of Marc Gasol, what do people say about Marc Gasol? Well, they talk about how he's an amazing defender, how he's one of the smartest players in the NBA, how he makes everyone around him better. And there are those, classic plus minus on off numbers that show that Toronto was horrendous on defense whenever he was not on the court. And the question becomes, what is the real Marc Gasol? Is it the guy who's essentially worth 0 wins produced over the course of a season, as he was last season? Or is he somebody who, because of his presence on the court, actually is able to help the Lakers improve defensively, or at least stay even defensively after losing guys like Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee? And is he able to improve the Lakers offensively by providing another super high IQ, high post passer? I mean, this is a guy who has averaged, looking at his statistics, looks like 5 assists per 36. And
he's a really good passer.
The average big is at 2.9. And this is a guy who's had some amazing passing years, a lot more amazing passing years recently. Now you're imagining a Lakers team out there with LeBron James and Marc Gasol, with guys like Alex Caruso, KCP, and Kyle Kuzma cutting.
I'm buying this argument, Chris.
This could be pretty interesting.
I'm buying this argument because here's why. So first of all, Marc Gasol's age is a problem, but let's just say he keeps it going. The reason he's been bad in the past, overall in aggregate, is because he's one of his team's main options on offense, and he's just a poor percentage shooter, right? He shoots these threes not very well. He shoots long twos not very well. But if he goes to the Lakers, he's not going to need to take as many shots. So if he can shoot way less and focus on passing and playing defense, yeah, I'm buying that, he could be as good as JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard.
Now, I want to make a funny point. So Marc Gasol, everyone talks about Marc Gasol as being old, which he is. Marc Gasol is the 6th oldest player in the NBA. Can you name the 5 players in the NBA who are older than him?
Oh, I love this.
We lost Vince Carter, right? So he doesn't count.
Vince Carter retired. He no longer
Press
counts.
F for Vince.
Carmelo Anthony is one of the 5. 4 more to go.
Good one, Jay.
Okay. Can't be LeBron, right? Because that's true.
LeBron James is 1 month older than Marc Gasol.
Really?
Two out of the
2
5.
for 2. Oh my God.
They're
Two out
both
of the
35, is that right? Or
LeBron James just turned 36. Marc Gasol turns 36 next month.
Okay, so Dwight Howard has to be one, right? Because he was drafted.
He is not.
No, he was so young when he came into the league.
He was so young. He is not older. He is old, but
he's
is
close.
not older. You have 3 more that you need 3 more players.
Is J.R. Smith still in the league?
J.R. Smith is not in the league, and he's also not that old.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He also came into the league super young.
Okay. Oh, yeah, because I guess there's... All right. I'll say...
Then Pau Gasol doesn't count either by that
Pau Gasol
logic.
not currently active, not signed to any team.
He's older than Mark. I know that.
Yes, he's definitely older than
I
Mark.
could cheat and obviously look it up, but or also I think at this point, if I look at a list of players, it's cheating.
But the fun part is trying to guess.
This is a very fun question.
Well,
we're thinking about this.
Give me one hint. Are they?
You mentioned one of these guys earlier. We talked about one of these guys earlier in the broadcast.
Oh, Rudy Gay? No, he's not that old.
No, not quite.
Is Rudy Gay still active?
He's still active.
He's
still
starting for the Spurs. Yeah.
I'm gonna pass.
I'm gonna be so mad, Chris, because I know all these.
Yeah.
But...
Well, what do we got?
Andre Iguodala.
Oh, of course.
It was just me. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I just threw something that was harder than I meant to at the wall. But anyway.
JJ Redick
is
older than LeBron James.
Yeah. That's totally true.
And then finally, somebody who is who I would have definitely guessed as being the oldest guy in the NBA with Vince Carter now retired, and he is Udonis Haslem.
Oh, and he
'Cause
famously re-signed too.
He re-signed.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So Marc Gasol, Methuselah, broken down, ancient, 1 month younger than LeBron James.
But I mean, LeBron, it was interesting, Brian, as I mentioned, I was kind of looking at old podcasts we've done. And one of the points I was making on LeBron James is like 3 years ago, LeBron James had exceeded like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal by kind of metrics as, as age, time played, etc. I've been wrong so often, Chris, because I've been like, he's got to slow down, and he hasn't yet. No, he might, but the one good thing I've said about LeBron is I think his motivation, and there are two now in striking distance. One I thought was unheard of. One is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's all-time scoring record.
And
so here's my favorite one. My favorite
It is within reach.
Are you gonna? Do you know the one I'm gonna say, Brian? The other is
playing with Bronny. Playing with Bronny.
Oh, okay. So that too. So that's not record based though, but agreed.
Oh,
so
I see. I'm sorry, I missed that.
No, but
6 championships.
Right. Yeah, that's
not a record, but that's clearly within reach. He's got 4,
Yeah.
and he wants to get 6 so he can win that debate with Michael Jordan. 7 if he could.
Yeah, ideally. And then the other one is actually on that note, Jerry West's finals scoring record. So some record, basically rebounds and blocks, because of, to be kind of mean, how bad the NBA was, they're never going to get touched.
Yeah.
You're never going to get the number of misses that a 1960s basketball game had to let any player in the finals come anywhere close to, those Bill Russell's rebounding totals in the finals, never going to get touched.
Well, you're talking about 130, 140 possession games with an average shooting percentage of 40%.
Exactly. But in one shining beacon in the light of that darkness was Jerry West. Jerry West was one of the efficient scorers back in the day. And, if there had been a 3-point line, the Lakers would have had a couple more titles, Chris, because Jerry West made some Hail Mary buzzer beaters that were definitely outside of the 3-point range. Jerry West has the all-time record for points scored in the finals, and LeBron James is within reach of that if he could get to 1 or 2 more.
Yeah. So let me finally touch on 1 or 2 things with the Lakers. So the reason why I'm still actually pretty optimistic about the Lakers is the following. The first thing is, as you know, they didn't rank as highly as the Mavericks or the Milwaukee Bucks in the final standings for the season. But part of it is they didn't give a crap about the bubble. So the Lakers went 3-5 in the bubble. They essentially didn't bother playing after they won their first game. Once they won their first game, there was no way the Clippers could catch them. And so they essentially stopped playing. And so they went 3-5 in the bubble. If instead they kept going with the same rate that they're going before the bubble, i.e., beating the Clippers and Bucks in the same weekend, maybe they go 6-2 in the bubble instead of 3-5. It's another 3 wins, pumps them up a bit. And then if we have somebody like Taylon Horton Tucker come in and provide a boost to the team, if he provides an Alex Caruso-like boost, that's an extra 3 wins. If he outperforms Alex Caruso and gets to something like a star level, that's another 6 wins. So the Lakers could still be within striking distance of the number of wins they produced last season, despite the losses, if they're able to get more production out of guys like Kyle Kuzma from bouncing back, and if they add a guy like Taylon Horton Tucker.
Yeah, I think they're definitely the real question is going to be how well LeBron James holds up. I think that is the thing. I still think the Nuggets been going for a while.
And Dre, this is why Anthony Davis is a good MVP bet, by the way, because LeBron likes to not play as hard in the season, right? He's just going to feed Anthony Davis, it feels like, in the regular season.
So what I want to jump to, let's get the Nuggets and the Warriors for sure. Then we'll kind of hop around on other teams as we want, and then see when it's time to hop out. So I still think the Nuggets are the favorite, but you've talked me into thinking the Lakers are. The Lakers easily, based on the health of LeBron James and a couple of young players bouncing back in great shape. Even the Marc Gasol point you're making, I mean, just based on their roster, LeBron James, Montrezl Harrell, and Anthony Davis, he doesn't have to play a ton of minutes. So if he's even just there as kind of an insurance policy, that could even help him out more
Right.
if he's more rested and not trying to be the offensive load.
Right. By the way,
but
let me point out that the Nuggets were 24 games worse than the Bucks last year
all right,
in terms
that
of wins produced.
is fair. But the Nuggets have Nikola Jokic. Let's see. Oh, they kept Paul Millsap? I thought Paul Millsap
They
went out the
kept
door.
Paul
They kept
Millsap.
him.
How much? Do you remember? I did not look this up, so I apologize.
Was he
That's
even
not
a free agent? Yeah, I guess he was.
He was, but they re-signed him. Let's see, Millsap contract. Survey says 1 year, $10 million. Hey, you know what? That's a great deal.
Yeah.
That's more than fun. And
That's
I mean,
a
also,
great deal.
Yeah, that's. I mean, even it's what's amusing is as soon as we get into what I'd call a replacement level player contract, a lot of the geeky analytics takes go out the door, and you can start even doing other stuff. So Paul Millsap comes back, plays at his production, kept Monte Morris, Jamal Murray. It's hard not to be super optimistic about Michael Porter Jr. We dodged a bullet with Jeremy Grant, as we were already laughing about going to Detroit.
$20 million. You think Kyle Kuzma at 12 or 13 is bad? How about Jeremy Grant at 20?
And I am super. I was a little more excited. I am super psyched about JaMychal Green. Isaiah Hartenstein is hard to tell. I hope I'm saying that right. If it's
You
not
are.
Steiner-Stein, but Isaiah Hartenstein, it's hard to tell because he's played limited minutes, but was
He's
horrible
been good
his rookie
in
season.
those minutes.
Really good as sophomore season. The other players all rookies. It's hard. Campazzo. I hope I'm not butchering his name. It is hard not to get excited about his passing, but he's a rookie, so I'm not expecting much. But
he's a little bit older, Ike, because he's not American.
Is he? Oh.
I think so. I think he's
I think sometimes it goes the other way.
I'm curious now. I'll look up his age.
Okay, yeah, thanks. But I'm just saying the Nuggets basically stayed in place with a pretty young core that's pretty talented, that's just improving. And so
yeah, he's 29, Dre. He's 29.
He's 29.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's like Brad Wanamaker. He's like, he's only been in the league 2 years. Well, he's 31.
What was it? That's Luis Scola back in the day, who was like third in rookie. But okay, so maybe we'll see. We'll see. I'll have to.
Listen, the best reasons for the Nuggets to do better are pretty simple. Jokic has a bounce back season, which I assume he will, and MPJ goes nuts.
And Murray stays good, right? He doesn't revert to his regular season.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, I kind of like. I might have to get Campazzo's jersey because at least according to his listed height, he's the same height as the 29 Dre. I've shrunk a little in my old age, but yeah, I might have to do that.
Campazzo is fun to watch, Dre. You're gonna like him. He plays really hard as well. Speaking
Will
of
Barton having a bounce back year would be good too. He's a player I've really liked historically. So
because Torrey Craig's a big loss. Like Barton needs to replace Craig, I think.
Yeah,
he's an okay lot. He was a good player, but I think JaMychal Green is more than fine to make up for that, at least production-wise.
You figure he's going to play the Grant minutes probably? Green will?
That sounds about right, yeah. And I think Grant's, again, one of these defensive players. So I think just the Nuggets were a really good team last season. If they have just some aging to their young core, and if we have a break, if Bol, Michael Porter Jr., if either of those players, Campazzo, if any of those three players just happens to have a breakout season, Isaiah Hartenstein, I think they're in a good shot. And I'm just going to stay optimistic. Like I said, my hot take is Bucks Nuggets for the finals this year.
I love it. Let's see. Do I have anything on the Nuggets? No, I just agree with Chris. I agree that it's all about age. They were really young when they were making their runs the last few seasons. So now that these guys are hitting their primes, yeah, it's really all about Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray. For me, I'm not worried about Jokic.
First team in NBA history, as I recall, to have 7-game series in a row, as well as 2-3-1. So they got that going for them.
God, that was a heck of a playoffs last year, wasn't it? That was fun.
It was incredible. And again, I loved watching the playoffs. I loved rooting for the Nuggets up to the point where they got to face the Lakers. At which point it was time to root for the thing that always happens, which is the Lakers eliminating the Nuggets.
I noted that the Nuggets and the Heat were such great underdog feel-good stories, and the Lakers were just like, nope.
Sorry.
Okay.
And by the way, that's the reason why the Lakers. That is the reason why the Lakers do well in the playoffs last year, and why they have a good shot this year, which is they don't have the coach booed problem. They have Frank Vogel, who proved himself to be a very good adjustment maker and head coach, and who will play his best players and ride them when he needs to in the playoffs. The Lakers beat the Heat. They said basically, yeah, you know what? We're not too proud to just keep doing the same thing we're doing. We're going to bench everyone. We're going to play AD at center, and in the final clinching game, we're going to start the greatest of all time, Alex Caruso, for the first time all season, because we believe that he's going to get us off to a good start. And they essentially crushed the Heat from the outset, and the game wasn't even close.
Love it. Now here's what's funny. I'm optimistic about the Nuggets. I'm optimistic about the Lakers. I'm optimistic about the Bucks, but I would say you could argue all three teams maybe I think the Nuggets kind of like stayed in place, which may not be what you want to do with, as Chris pointed out, you're 24 games back of the best team in the league. The Warriors probably improved this offseason, but we'll see. So the biggest question is how Klay Thompson and Steph Curry come back. They didn't really have major moves.
Clay is not coming back. He's injured again.
I completely spaced. Oh my goodness.
Achilles.
Yeah, because he immediately got injured again.
So sad. It is so sad. Everyone loves Clay. Lakers fans love Clay because, of course, he is a scion of the Showtime Lakers.
Oh yeah.
And, it's just a sad, sad thing.
Michael Thompson Sr. is an announcer for them, right, Chris? So
that's right. The great Michael Thompson, 2-time Laker champion.
First overall draft pick.
Overall draft pick. Great interview, great broadcaster. And, again, is just been such a proud NBA father. Just imagine, right?
Family is from the Bahamas also, which is awesome.
That's right. Loves conch.
Yep.
Get some good conch fritters.
Yeah, that's great.
The one problem we run into, unfortunately, is we don't know how Steph is going to come back. And then, of course, number one pick, or should have been number one pick.
Yes.
Apologies. As I was laughing so hard because you tried to warn him, Brian. You were saying, why do you want Anthony Edwards? And I apologize. As is obvious, given the fact that I knew but forgot. So I do want to stress, I did know, but I will admit I have not been following closely on the preseason. It's just so weird. I mean, I'm not used to having the NBA starting around Christmas time, a mere what the regular season just ended. But Anthony Edwards in the NBA, I believe, was shooting below 40% a game, and I wonder if he finished out the preseason that way. I really want to see that. I'm trying to look that up.
I love looking on Twitter sometimes. This Anthony Edwards was trending because he hit his first 3 3-pointers, and then he finished the game like 3 for 10.
Oh, no.
Okay, so it is only 3 games. I got to say, I told you this, Brian. I got my first Anthony Edwards subtweet, which is that I said, in baseball, if you go 1 for 3, you're a star. In basketball, if you go 1 for 3, you're a liability. And let's be more clear. Game 1 against Memphis, 22%, 2 for 9. Game 2 against Memphis again, 4 for 14, 28.6%. Against Dallas, he finally went up to 33.3%. And I was laughing my something off when I was reading some Twitter because people were like, Anthony Edwards versus Doncic, this is a matchup. And I went and looked and I went 5 for 15 and 3 for 8 from 3. That is not a matchup. Like, if you have a true shooting percentage below 50%, that is not a good thing. So
he did look good defending Doncic. They had a couple of possessions. They're matched up 1-on-1. Doncic had trouble shaking him.
He's a super athlete is the thing about Edwards.
Okay, and apologies if there's any loud noise in the background as I'm looking this up because I really want to see this. Yeah. Okay, so Luka, this is you are right, Chris. So Luka Doncic went 6 for 18, and that was primarily because 0 for 6 from 3. So there might be, that could be variance because if he goes 2 for 6 from 3, then that's 8 for 18. He did get to the line 4 or 5 times depending. So Luka Doncic at least got the following: 20 points on 18 shots, but 9 free throws. So yeah, I guess you're right. Luka Doncic had a bad scoring night, but he beat Anthony Edwards, who had a much worse scoring night.
Yeah, the Warriors, the last thing I'll say about the Warriors is I know the Warriors were light years ahead. That was the famous saying. I just cannot believe that they're paying this colossal amount of money and they still have Andrew Wiggins.
Oh, yeah.
What is up with that?
It's a bizarre, because they traded Kevin Durant for D'Angelo Russell, and we gave them the Kuzma out. So by the way, if the Lakers follow the route of turning Kyle Kuzma then into, say, Anthony Edwards, then we get to mock them for doing what the Warriors did, because we can say D'Angelo Russell was an asset. You have an all-star player that's
he's no good, but he was an all-star.
And he's around 30 million, and there's market value for him. And we saw players like, obviously Jimmy Butler was on the market at one point. I don't know if that would have taken, obviously.
Whoops, that was my phone. Sorry about that, guys.
That was like old. That sounds like
it sounds like a rotary phone. I love it.
Is that just your dial tone?
I do. I have it set up to sound like an old-fashioned phone.
Love it.
Excellent. I like it.
Okay, so we've got not worth it, but we had players like Clint Capella come on the market. How am I dropping Andre Drummond, who was woefully underpaid? So it's like, you got to believe they could have got the farm with D'Angelo Russell for Andre Drummond and more, right? They could have. Andre Drummond was like traded for like 2 second-round picks, so they could have gotten Andre Drummond and future picks and maybe a third player.
I want to push back a little, Dre. So everything you're saying is what happened and what was reported in the media, right? And what we thought was going to happen. But I'm having some revisionist history on it these days. I just think. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, so what do you got on D'Angelo Russell?
No, just that I think it was never true that he had the value. I thought people were saying he did, but I haven't heard any, like you said, good trades that they passed up for him. I think they added him as an asset and got bit in the butt is what happened.
I agree. They traded, let's be clear, they traded D'Angelo Russell to the Timberwolves for Andrew Wiggins, a protected first-round pick, and a second-round pick.
Yeah.
Now, you'd have to pay me a first-round pick and a second-round pick to get me to take Andrew Wiggins. You'd probably have to pay me 2 first-round picks to take Andrew Wiggins.
They dug the hole deeper. So I was really critical on our show last offseason of what the Warriors did. I wanted them to say, see you later, KD, because they had no choice. He was gone no matter what. Apparently, they knew that for a year. Then I would have said, I'm sorry, Clay, but you've got this torn ACL. Of course, we have the hindsight of the Achilles too, but even then we were saying, you can't, if you have Steph Curry in his prime, you can't have a tanking year and pay Clay and then bring in veterans and try to build from there. So,
to be fair, this could have been a very alliance. We've argued this. This could have been a very alliance thing. For those that don't know, your first book, Chris, or was it your first? Did you have before
that?
Yes,
it is my first book.
Okay, so your first book, The Alliance, also with Reid Hoffman and Ben Casnocha, was about setting fair expectations and jobs primarily focused on tech. And we think this applies to the NBA so much because where we see teams and players fall apart is a player thinks they're going to be a star and a team really needs them as a 6-man, and the player wants a big payday, but the team was expecting to be loyal. So they could have gone to Clay and said, we will put you wherever we can get you to the Lakers, right? Probably dodged a bullet there, Chris, but a
lot of Lakers fans wanted Clay. I was like, the narrative says yes, he's the son of a Laker and he's a great shooter and LeBron wants to be surrounded by shooters, but my God, the numbers are god awful.
Yeah, so I mean, they could have said, we will get you paid and we will get you wherever you want, but we need something back. And we kind of noticed from an alliance perspective, what they did is they overpaid Clay, which they really couldn't afford to do. We kind of respected them for that. And then they immediately lost any respect I'd give them for loyalty to Clay by shipping Iguodala essentially for cap space, where with both of those players, they could have been more upfront and said, here's where we're at right now. We'll get you wherever we want. It is very clear Andre Iguodala did not want to go to Memphis, given the fact that he sat out and said, give me to the Lakers. So
that was my argument, Dre, is that they should have not, well, I call it the time, it was like an Avengers Doctor Strange kind of plot. We're going to take a 14 million to 1 chance to trade all these assets for something. They should have given up those assets, kept Iguodala, and signed some free agents like Derek Favors, someone like that, and made another championship run. You can't waste Steph Curry prime seasons. In retrospect, Curry got hurt, so it wouldn't have mattered. But so here's my point on this offseason, though. I wanted them to break up the team before. I wish they'd done it again this offseason, right? I wish they had tried to trade Clay before the Achilles. Obviously, they can't do it after. A lot of these other players and, try to build up a championship winning team this year. And here's the thing I'll say. This is based on how good I think their front office is. and that they are stuck on this plan no matter what of not blowing up the team, they did about as well as they could do with keeping the core of this team together. Of course,
I will say the following from Hispanos NBA. According to them, and I don't know what this means, it says interested in Jeremy Lin. So I'll make you a deal. I'll make you a deal, Golden State. I don't care how you do. I will revise my grade from, I would say, C, and they get a C because they picked Wiseman, which is the wise choice. Ha ha ha. You pick Lin, I'll bump you to B, just because we love it. It's very similar. The Atlanta Hawks signed Vince Carter last season, and I said, I don't want to live. Come on, come back, Vince. You can come back. I don't want to live in an NBA without Vince Carter. So
the story with Jeremy Lin is they were trying to sign him to a deal, but some deadline passed where they didn't get permission from the Chinese Basketball Association, which is where he played last year. So he wasn't able to sign the deal. So now they're trying to sign him to a two-way deal. That's what's going on with Jeremy Lin.
I'm still, if you get Lin, I'll bump you to B. Yeah, I agree, though.
But here's why I think this is kind of the best they could have done under this current strategy, right? So what was the problem last year? They had very small players who couldn't shoot or play defense, right? And that's just, what else do you need in the NBA, right? You need those things. So Steve Kerr was a lot more involved this offseason than usual because they didn't make the playoffs or play in the bubble or anything, and the season ended early, right? Normally, Steve Kerr is coaching the finals the last 5 seasons up until a few weeks before the draft even, right? So this year he was actually able to have input into the offseason moves. And what he said was, internally and publicly, is our team is too small. We need bigger players that can defend more. And that's what they did, right? They moved Wiggins, who was playing forward before, to shooting guard, and he's 6'7", 6'8". He's going to replace Klay Thompson. They brought in Oubre, who is 6'7" with a big wingspan, plays really aggressive on the ball defense. He's a little lost off the ball at times. We'll see if Draymond can coach him up. So they just got really big and a lot more active on defense on the wings. And, of course, Wiseman is the biggest of them all. Other than Boban, he's one of the biggest players in the NBA. And the last thing I'll say is the Wiseman hype is out of control right now. So the Warriors are known for being very candid and leaky in the media. And in fact, last season, that disastrous season I was just talking about, they were already saying in the preseason, yeah, we're done. This team's terrible. So they have some credibility hyping up their own players because they don't always do it, right? Wiseman supposedly looks like David Robinson. We'll see tomorrow, but this is one of those hype versus reality things, but I am ready for the Wiseman hype.
To quote the classic Wages of Win saying, the short supply of tall people. I mean, think about what the Warriors had before. Because they had guys like Kevin Durant, they actually had tall people. They didn't seem like tall people because they weren't centers. It's like, oh, yeah, we're playing small ball with Draymond Green. But as you point out, it's not small ball if you've got Kevin Durant, who's practically 7 feet tall out
and
there.
Andrew
He's
Bogut.
A great shot blocker, too.
Yeah. And the same thing for the Lakers. Look, the Lakers were successful last season when they played small ball because their small ball is we move Anthony Davis to center and we play LeBron James at power forward. That's small ball for the Lakers. That's not small ball. That's big ball.
Yep.
And then when they played small ball, they would move Anthony Davis to center, and then they would put as the shortest player out there, they'd usually put KCP or Alex Caruso, who's either 6'4" or 6'5". So their small ball lineups were 6'5" to 6'11". And that's not exactly small ball.
And that's the biggest Warriors' weakness probably and the problem they did last season too, is Wiseman is their only big body they're going into the season with. Everyone else is 6'9" or smaller and not bulky. I mean, Draymond's a little bulky and so is Pascal, but they're short, right? Looney and Chris, they're not that big. They're more.
Looney's pretty good. Looney's pretty good.
Looney's a good defender, and he's interesting because he defends like James Harden on the switch in the playoffs and big centers, like Steven Adams or whatever, the Lakers centers. Looney's problem is his injuries are just ridiculous. He's supposed to be really healthy right now, and I hope that's true, but he's had like 3 hip surgeries. He has neuropathy in his lower body, nerve pain and nerve damage, and he's only 24, so that's why I'm worried about Looney, but I love him when he's on the court.
Yeah, career wins produced per 48, 181.
Oh, yeah.
He's pretty good. I'll take it.
He's played for them late into the playoffs and in the finals. Like, he is he's still young, but he's a tested veteran at this point that knows the defense really well.
So, by the way, let's not forget the Lakers' 11th man, the 12th man, Alfonso McKinney. Warriors fan favorite.
That's right. I loved him.
Incredible story. A guy who is undrafted. Nobody wanted him. He tried out for the G League. He came in, and now he's playing for the Lakers. And the Lakers, ironically enough, let's not forget, the Lakers traded JaVale McGee to the Cleveland Cavaliers to free up cap space for their various maneuverings. And they had Jordan Bell and Alfonso McKinney. They could keep one of the two, and they chose to keep McKinney.
Really, over Bell? Bell's nice and not.
Bell has burned all of his bridges off the court. Bell has burned all of his bridges off the court at this point.
Bell was a guy that we thought was going to be fantastic. I mean, Jordan Bell came into the league and he looked great, but then after his rookie season, he's been awful. And as Brian pointed out, he's burned his bridges off the court as well.
God, and I was okay. So, and by the way, with where we're at, I was going to say I'm about to call time, not for lack, but like even just looking over this, realizing how many more teams. And thank you again, Chris, for getting us on. I think I know just pandemic and even other stuff. As a side, the thing behind me, Chris, inspired by you, I've got a Final Fantasy X map behind me on my thing. I have been just for fun playing. Streaming Blitzball on the Nerd Numbers Twitch channel. In fact, just as, you know, a wind down, relaxing thing. Don't know if I was quite ready to come back to the NBA. Can't believe it's starting Christmas week. But man, a lot's happened. We have not talked the James Harden drama in Houston. The question of how the Clippers will be, there's a lot. So I was going to say, what if we each take one team with one hot take, and that'll be our show. And then, of course, we're going to have to come back and talk more. And then I've got some shout outs that are related to you at the end, Chris.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I need a little time to think about a team to have a hot take.
I got one, Jay.
Okay, beautiful.
My hot take is Rudy Gobert being maxed out by the Utah Jazz is a great move. They're a small market team. They have a tough time luring free agents to Utah. I mean, just to be kind of crude about it, you know, like a bunch of white Mormons, you know, if you're a young black guy, you want to live with all those Republicans, like probably not. So yeah, it's really tough. And Rudy Gobert is maybe the best defensive player in basketball. He's really good and underrated. So I love that move by the Jazz.
And they brought back Derek Favors and let Emmanuel Moody out the door. So
I mean, they're making good moves.
If same kind of point we're making Jamal Murray, if Donovan Mitchell stays Donovan Mitchell from the playoffs, they got Rudy Gobert, Derek Favors takes the Ed Davis role and they actually give him minutes. Yeah, that'd be a good shape. All right, let's see. I'm going to try and pick wisely, but it doesn't really matter. We got plenty of time in the future to talk. I don't know. The Brooklyn Nets are just fascinating. I have no idea what to think about what's going to happen there. Because, you know, similar to the Warriors, and the Warriors have already shown one of the players leaving with injury, Klay Thompson, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, if healthy, are amazing. And I've been really baffled in this offseason by the DeAndre Jordan hate because he was still really good last season. And to the same point you were making about the Lakers, Chris, end of the season, the Nets knew they were done. Kevin Durant said I think if Kevin Durant had said, if we make the playoffs, I'll come back, they might have tried in the bubble. But he did not. And so I don't even believe DeAndre Jordan played that much. You know, they still have Jeff.
So they have Jared Allen, and if you don't like DeAndre Jordan, just play Jared Allen. He's amazing. They're both good.
And that's the thing. I mean, I think that the reason there's hate for DeAndre is just people feel like he's in the way of Jared Allen, who looks like he's going to be awesome, is already incredibly good. He produced over 10 wins last season. He's playing at a star level. So, you know, you have, I mean, this is an embarrassment of riches, right? 2 star or superstar level centers. My God.
And part of that can just be good, keep the rest of the NBA from having that. Now, they, for whatever reason, and I have no idea why, they brought in Jeff Green. Now, the interesting part is some of the players they let out the door, such as Michael Beasley and Wilson Chandler, are players that were bad as well, so you wouldn't have wanted them on the roster. And who even knows at his age how much he'll get played? So it's just the Brooklyn Nets are a team where no number of wins, 30 to 60, would surprise me.
So I just want to ask this one question about Wilson Chandler. Wilson Chandler looks like he's played 15 seasons in the NBA. He's entering his 16th
What?
season. How is this possible? This guy has never been good.
Yeah.
He's had exactly 2 seasons where he's been above average. What on earth causes this guy to be kept on team after team after team? What naked pictures of GMs does he have?
I recall this was actually a painful one because he was part of the Carmelo Anthony trade back in the day, from the Toronto or from the New York Knicks, and the belief was, and kind of say, at least I heard from various people at like Sloan, that he was supposed to be a trade asset and then he got injured. So basically the Nuggets traded for him with the express purpose of trading him out, which was great, which was the arbitrage thing we liked. You know, he's a young player that looks like he has upside, but we know better and we'll get something back for him. And he could never stay healthy, so we could never trade him off until eventually he just, ended up leaving kind of naturally. So I have no idea. And you started the show talking about Kyle Kuzma, and in past shows you've talked about Alex Caruso. There is something to the NBA about your perception and how the front office is like you that I'd be really curious, Chris, if you read another business book, if you're going to use like Kyle Kuzma and Alex Caruso as examples, classic business stuff you hear, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know, it's perception, making sure what work you do is getting visibility, stuff like that. A lot of good engineers, right, make the mistake of thinking, I'm just going to write a bunch of code and everybody's going to know I'm great, not realizing I'm going to have to make sure people know my code. And even if it is great code, know how to use it, know where it is. So maybe something there to it. I agree. Jeff Green and Wilson Chandler are 2 players that I look over their contracts, I look over the numbers and just go, how, over and over and over.
Astonishing. By the way, a quick shout out to Alex Caruso, who this is probably the most Caruso moment of all time. And he has so many amazing highlights. But in the bubble, Alex Caruso famously chose to skip his sister's wedding so he would not have to leave the bubble. So his sister, he's from Texas, so of course you can do anything in Texas. His sister was getting married in this gigantic 150-person wedding, and he said, no, I'm not going to go because it means I will have to spend time in quarantine when I come back. I'm serious about winning a championship. Meanwhile, of course, Lou Williams, one of our favorites, leaves the bubble for the Clippers on an excused absence and stops off at a strip club for wings.
That just to give a little more.
They're good wings.
They're named after him. They look amazing. That place is world famous for wings. So you can't fault the desire. And I mean, I would say with Caruso, I would still
yes,
say
you can.
I haven't had physical combat with a human being in 10 months, Dre. You have to show some willpower, damn it.
I was gonna say with Caruso, I also like the, even phrasing it as I want a championship, or even the I wish we had more public facing people with COVID saying we need to take this seriously, which we're still not seeing. I mean, at this point, it's just a race between how soon the vaccine gets rolled out and what we're going to do. And we're just going to look at the final numbers. I
hate to say it, Dre, but it's too late. Christmas is going to pound us. It's going to be really, really bad.
And no, that's what I'm saying. Is I'm saying at this point, the finish line is the vaccine. The finish line isn't, can we get people back more responsible. And when we look at the final numbers, it's just going to be an embarrassment.
Versus Australia, 0 cases.
Yep.
Entire continent, 0 cases.
I need to take it back to basketball for my own well-being.
Yes. Here's go, and then I figured out what I want to cite. I've got something I forgot to mention that we talked about before the show. I'm going to come back to it.
I have one thing on the Brooklyn Nets, Dre, which is, yes, we love their bigs, and I'll put Kevin Durant in that category. He's not really a wing, even though he wants to be sometimes. So if you look at their backcourt, right, Kyrie Irving and Joe Johnson, man, those guys can shoot. Those guys can score.
Joe Harris.
Sorry, Joe Harris. What did I say?
Joe Johnson.
Joe Johnson.
Machine, man.
Oh, my God, Joe Johnson. He used to play on the Nets. Sorry, Joe Harris.
He did, actually, yeah.
Yeah, and some of these other guys, right, even Karis LeVert, they have no defense at all in the wings. Like, that's a big complaint I'm hearing about Brooklyn, is they're going to be a sieve on defense. And maybe their bigs can, clean it up at the rim. But, yeah, I can see that as a real complaint.
Yep.
And we'll just have to see. Because, DeAndre Jordan was, did he win Defensive Player of the Year? If not, he's at least made all defense. So,
Yeah,
It's
but
been
he
a
hasn't
while,
done that
though.
in a while.
And also, I think something we have routinely noted is that individual defense is often overrated, and it really does take a team. And
Yeah.
so, to what you're saying, if there aren't enough ingredients on the team to make a cohesive defense, but we'll have to see.
We don't know. It's so much turnover on this team. It's a really interesting team.
Let's not forget, very famously one time, Marc Gasol did not make first team all defense, but won defensive player of the year.
And to be fair, I've noted that, and then as I both know, when you do this, Chris, where you say the trivia, so I'm sure you know what I'm about to tell you as well. You say the trivia, but it tweets 280 characters, 140 back in the day for those of us that remember the before times.
Old
before
school,
Trump.
baby.
Yeah, before Trump, pre-Trump days. But different voters vote on those two awards, so it makes sense for why it could happen, but it is kind of silly.
Yes. So I have got the perfect way to cap this off. So we talked a little bit about Kyle Kuzma and the fact that he signed a 3-year, $40 million contract extension. Oh. We need to remember some of his classmates from that year's draft. So Markelle Fultz signed a 3-year, $50 million extension with the Orlando Magic. This is a guy who cannot actually shoot.
And the belief
signed a 3-year, $50 million
is contract. As a rookie or before his rookie year, he got injured. What was it, on a bike, right? Like BMX biking was one of the theories I've heard, and it's just not been the same since. So he's basically never been healthy in the NBA.
So and again, I feel bad for the kid, and I wish him the best, but my God, he's played one season where he actually has been able to hit jump shots, and even then he shot something like 25% from three. And they gave him a 3-year, $50 million contract, which I assume has to just be because he was formerly the number 1 pick. Now, let's remember this very famous draft. Number 1 pick, Markelle Fultz out of Washington, consensus number 1 pick. Number 2 pick, Lonzo Ball out of UCLA. And number 3 pick, Jason Tatum out of Duke. The Boston Celtics traded down from Markelle Fultz to Jason Tatum to the number 3 pick. And over the years, what did people say? Markelle Fultz, great, sad, tragedy. Lonzo Ball, shot broken. What a shame. Jason Tatum, amazing, amazing player, one of the top young players in the league. And, of course, Markelle Fultz signed a 3-year, $50 million extension. Jason Tatum signed a full max extension. Lonzo Ball remains unsigned, so he's going to be a restricted free agent at the end of this year. Now, I asked you guys this question at the beginning, and you did not believe it. But as it turns out, Lonzo Ball had a better season last year than Jason Tatum. Produced more wins and produced at a better clip.
People are biased by the postseason, Chris, I think. I think it's recency bias.
Lonzo Ball has always been a good player, an above-average player, every single season from his rookie year on.
He does everything well.
He does everything well. He's even shooting the three-pointer reasonably well. He shot almost 38% last year.
He's Jason Kidd. I mean, he's the modern-day Jason Kidd because his scoring is still that. Again, noting with inflation, right? Jason Kidd's true shooting was in the 40s, but that was back when you can get away with it. Lonzo Ball got his true shooting up to 51.7% last season. That's still too low, but he does everything else well. And I think you've also said his defense is pretty good as well.
Amazing passer, amazing rebounder. Really good defender. I don't know why people said he was a bad defender coming out of UCLA. Anyone who watched those UCLA games, which I did because I knew the Lakers had a high pick and I was hoping they would get him, knew that he was the best defender on those UCLA teams.
He's big. He's really big on the wings.
And guess what? Lonzo Ball has switched representation a couple times. He came into the league famously represented by his dad, LeVar Ball. No longer. The agency he's now with is Rich Paul and Clutch Sports.
Yep.
So Lonzo Ball, not signed, restricted free agent. We'll see. Who knows? Maybe a sign and trade to the Lakers to join the Clutch family there.
Oh, so Chris,
time in the near future.
Chris, Lonzo can play backup point guard to THT. Is that what you're saying? He can be a backup?
Exactly. Lonzo will be the 6th man of the year. He'll play behind THT and Alex Caruso.
Beautiful.
I love it. And and Markelle Fultz, I mean, why? That's the one good. We're not going to go out of business anytime soon, and that there are contracts that we just, they're weird, contentious. Is Kobe overrated? Is Donovan Mitchell overrated? There are ones like that, but then there are contracts like Markelle Fultz or Jeff Green or Wilson Chandler. We just go, why? And I don't think anybody disagrees with us.
And by the way, speaking of why, let me just mention that the Los Angeles Clippers this offseason, the Los Angeles Clippers with their executive of the year from last season, the Los Angeles Clippers spent this offseason paying the same amount for 4 years of Paul George as the Lakers are paying for 5 years of Anthony Davis. And they have since handed out contract extensions. They are paying Marcus Morris, $64 million, and Luke Kennard, $64 million. Your executive of the year, ladies and gentlemen.
And am I mistaken? Kawhi's not re-signed yet.
Kawhi's not re-signed.
So yeah, he might be looking to try and match LeBron James with 3 Finals MVPs on 3 different teams. Or so LeBron has 4, but I'm saying Kawhi and Bron both had a Finals MVP on a different squad. Kawhi might go, hey, I'm going to get that 3rd Finals MVP. Denver Nuggets, Kawhi. Come on.
It could happen.
It's good news for you, Chris, because what I'm hearing is Kawhi will not play for anyone except the Lakers and the Clippers. He's from San Diego and basically commutes to LA from San Diego even now. So he's just about San Diego. That's all he cares about, apparently.
Let me add in a couple more fun Kawhi facts. So this has all been leaking out in the Los Angeles Times now.
Oh, some really bad stuff.
There was all this tension on the Clippers last season because there were the holdovers like Trez and Lou Williams, guys who fight and scrap and play hard. The Clippers launched these ad campaigns against the Lakers, street lights, not spotlights, saying the Lakers were prima donnas and the Clippers are the hardworking blue-collar types. And as it turns out, the perception was that Kawhi and Paul George could just decide whether or not the Clippers would have practice or not. Generally, the answer was no. Whenever they had flights, Kawhi was always late because he commuted from San Diego. So he showed up 2 or 3 hours late for every team flight. Just imagine how you would feel being on that team, knowing it's like, well, I showed up on time because if I don't, I get fined. But guess what? Kawhi's going to be 3 hours late again.
Do you think he's going to age like Dwight Howard? Because Dwight Howard is one of these players in his prime. No one's going to deny his greatness, his dominance. And then he slipped a little. He didn't even stop being a good player. He went from being de facto top 10 in the NBA to being worth 20 mil or whatever a year.
Couldn't get a contract.
Hated him.
Lakers signed him to a non-guaranteed deal last year. So here's the one thing I will say that the Clippers did done wisely. The Clippers went out and brought in the guy who is apparently Kawhi Leonard's only friend in the NBA, Serge Ibaka.
Oh,
interesting.
Wow.
Okay.
So Serge Ibaka is apparently Kawhi Leonard's only friend in the NBA. The Clippers brought him in. I heard they might even start him, which is astonishing considering they have the much better Ivica Zubats.
Well, remember that on-off statistic from earlier with the Raptors, right? And Gasol was good and no one else was. That's about Ibaka, right? His defense.
Exactly.
Not that much these days.
But hey, you know what? Kawhi Leonard likes him, so they went out and got him. $10 million, baby.
Yeah, Golden State beat writer said on his podcast this week that basically Kawhi is the biggest jerk in the NBA. It's not even close. Kind of a bold statement, but, you know, based on that San Diego flight story, I can't argue.
Yeah. So we'll see. Great NBA season tipping off tomorrow. Looking forward to another year. Here's to the Lakers. And I will close with a line from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. During the 1980s, they recorded a song that was a tribute to Magic Johnson. It is called Magic Johnson. And in it, they have the line, let's see if I can get this right. LA Lakers, fast break makers, kings of the court, shake and bake all takers. Back to back is a badass fact, a claim that remains intact.
That's even better than the Chicago Bears Super Bowl shuffle.
That's right. Go listen to it. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Magic Johnson.
I'm going to do that right after the end of this show. All right. So, Chris, I've got 2 shout outs. I'll lead with my more geeky chess one, which rest assured, if the NBA season wasn't starting tomorrow and we weren't several podcasts back, would have talked more. But Hikaru Nakamura, first off, Team TSM, a esports streaming athlete. That team is partially owned by Steph Curry. So fair to say that Steph Curry, Hikaru Nakamura is my favorite tandem of basketball chess ever. But Hikaru Nakamura has been just tearing it up in the chess.com Speed Chess Championship. he defeated MVL, who I would say has the coolest nickname and coolest name. So that is Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, who is also currently in line to face Magnus Carlsen for the next Classic World Champion. He's, if this makes sense, he was leading the candidates tournament that was stopped because of COVID. The candidates tournament's going to resume. If he can hold his lead, he'll face Magnus. And this was kind of a funny thing for those that don't know. In the Speed.com in the Chess.com Speed Championship, Magnus Carlsen came out after a 2-year hiatus to play. And he was going to, and it was just a foregone conclusion. It was going to be Magnus in the finals, likely against Hikaru. Hikaru defeated Wesley So, who he's been having an amazing rivalry with. Everybody said, Hikaru, isn't it going to be amazing to face Magnus in the finals? Hikaru in his interviews, it's going to be fun to see if I can take down Magnus in the finals. MVL, I would argue, picture this if you will, Brian. Picture the most dominant team of all time in the NBA. Let's give them some hypothetical number like 73 wins. Picture this team having, say, some ridiculously, let's say, 3-1 in the NBA Finals.
Don't be cruel.
Picture this team losing the NBA
this is
Finals.
Vicious, Dre.
That upset is essentially what MVL did to Magnus Carlsen. We got to watch that happen in chess. And then, of course, Hikaru Nakamura took him down. And I had the weirdest moment ever where I was so shocked by this upset that I tweeted about it. And one of my basketball followers went, spoilers, man, because it was streamed in the middle of the day. The basketball chess overlap is huge. We mentioned this on a show with you, Chris. Magnus Carlsen, in his breaks between chess, was watching the NBA playoffs, and in an interview, even noted that the Clippers choke. So we're huge fans of Magnus Carlsen. He bashed the Clippers in an interview on a tournament he won, but managed to get defeated by MVL. So huge shout out to Hikaru Nakamura, and the United States is just amazingly lucky to have Hikaru and Wesley So as the great streamer players they are. I'm not gonna lie, it's been one of the other aspects about not getting excited. Online chess has been so amazing, and there have been so many great tournaments that I've been watching those, and then I turned around and basketball is already back. Second shout out though is to you, Chris. On your podcast, you had a great podcast with Ray Conley, and what I want to say is this was the best example and tutorial of Bayesian statistics. I've got to give huge shout out to Ray Conley because he did it right. What he said is he had a theory that Trump had a 2/3 chance of being in the White House because of the Supreme Court, and his logic was very sound. He said, here's what I thought the odds of this happening were at the election. If I believe those odds are the same, this is in regards to the Supreme Court, and there was a case going to the Supreme Court, Texas suing other states about doing a recall of votes, basically. You said that's never going to get seen by the Supreme Court. Ray said he thought there was a 2/3 chance that it got seen by the Supreme Court. And if it did, of course, because Trump has appointed 3 of those people, that was going to go to him. And what he was basically saying is this is how Bayesian statistics work. I have what I assume are my priors. I insert those, and based on those, I give the output. But then we also accept the weakness of Bayesian statistics is not knowing the priors, because even Ray, this is why I love that show. Even at the end, he said, based on the math of my Bayesian statistics, I'm going to give this 66%. At the end of the show, he said 50%. And because he said he had a gut check, and he said, basically, my numbers say this, but I don't know if I can trust them. And that is always the flaw of Bayesian statistics. And we don't know how concrete the numbers are. I forget, didn't you have a bet with him at some point, Chris? Because I think you won that, right?
So there was, I don't remember if there was a bet, but I did ask him, what odds would someone have to offer for you to be willing to bet on Trump to win the presidency at this point? And despite all his Bayesian calculations, he said 10-1.
But see, again, why I want to give that a bunch of credit is when you use Bayesian math, the other aspect you should do is you say, here are my priors, here's the odds, here's the output. But you can also wisely say, here is the strength of my priors, because in sports, this happens all the time. We say, you could make the argument, correctly so, Bayesian wise, right? To win a title, to make the finals, you need LeBron James, right? Because of the last 18 NBA finals teams, right? 8 have had LeBron, right? 8 or 9? So it's 20. 9 of the last 20 NBA finals teams have had LeBron James. So you could say the Lakers next season have a 45% chance of making the finals because they have LeBron James, Bayesian statistics. But you can also turn around and say, but players age and we don't know how. So I think that was why I really liked it, because Ray said, here are my priors, here's my odds based on those priors. But then you were able to needle him to say he wasn't as confident in those priors. And that's how anybody doing Bayesian math should say, here's the numbers, but here's how confident I am in the priors. And if I'm not super confident in the priors, I can't be as confident in the output.
Yeah. And I still need to have Ray come back on. We were trying to find a good time for it because obviously, he had said, oh, this would be the crucial Supreme Court case.
Yeah.
And I said correctly, there's no chance that the Supreme Court's going to hear it. Roberts will never allow it. And that is exactly what happened. So I'm very curious to have Ray back on and see how it has changed his Bayesian calculations for the future.
Love it. All right. Well, those are my shout outs. If either of you two have shout outs, and then if not, we'll do plugs and head home.
I'll pass just based on the length of the show.
Exactly.
Shout out to you two and the entire world. Shout out to everyone in the world.
This is going to set a record. This may very well be the longest Boxscore Geeks podcast episode of all time.
We're not going to make it to 2 hours.
Yeah.
I don't know if we
had prep time. So it's like hour, half, hour 40, right, Brian?
Have you ever done a 2-hour one?
I'm not sure. We probably did back in the day, but no, we're almost to 2 hours airtime, Dre. This was a good long show.
Okay, well, anyway, so that has been the Boxscore Geeks show. Let's shout this out. Chris Yeh, that's YAH, you can find on Twitter as well as chrisyeh.com. And then if you haven't read already, look for both Blitzscaling and The Alliance. The Boxscore Geeks, you can find us the Boxscore Geeks show on iTunes, and then Nerd Numbers on YouTube, Twitch, and then boxscoregeeks.com. Nerd Numbers on Twitter for me, Boxscore Brian for Brian. I think that's everything. That's a show. Go Nuggets.
Let me just shout out one quick thing for those people who are Lakers fans out there. I think that the best Lakers broadcaster, best Lakers podcaster, best Lakers analyst out there is Pete Zayas of Lakers Film Room. Go ahead and check out Laker Film Room on YouTube. He is amazing. He's also a great podcaster. I'm a huge fan, Pete. I hope you hear this.
Yeah, good times.